And that means not only that evil is a problem because of what it does to us, but it's also a problem is why does it exist? And the question basically is, if God is all-knowing and all-powerful and all-loving, then why is there evil in the world? That's one of the more challenging questions to the Christian worldview. But as I tried to say a few months ago, it kind of occurred to me, there is not a single objection to the Christian faith that anyone can put forth, but what the Bible hasn't already addressed it. If you've never read the book of Ecclesiastes, if you've never read the book of Job, if you've never read, these are there. Even Romans 9 through 11, that very challenging section of that epistle that Paul writes to the believers at Rome. So we're having a good time, and you're welcome to join us on Facebook Live if you want to. We also have Zoom access if you'd like to join us, and then you can participate and ask questions. It's entirely up to you. If you'd like just to have the book and read along, that's perfectly fine too, however you want to do it. And we have a good time here. We meet in the foyer, and that's at 4 o'clock. So if you would like to meet via Zoom, which is an interactive way, see right now with these folks watching the message and the service, all they can do is just drop a little comment once in a while. They really can't enact in real time, but with Zoom you can do that. So if that's something that appeals to you, I'd love to invite you to come and be a part of it. So give me your email, and then I can send you an invitation online to Zoom. And who thought we'd ever be using these crazy words, Who would have thought that being Googled may be a good thing, What are you doing? I'm Googling you. Don't do that. It sounds rude, okay? No, that's our whole vocabulary has been greatly increased in terms of online technology. So also, the other thing I want to mention is this is Loose Change Sunday, or as we like to call it, Noisy Bucket Offering Sunday. So if you have some loose change floating around in your purse or wallet or pockets or whatever, we'd love to divest you of that today. The kids will be out. The kids will be out with buckets. See, that's what we do here at First Baptist for that offering. We like to ratchet up the awe factor for you. You can say no to a grumpy old man like me, but you can't say no to a little 5-year-old kid. Come on, right? No, seriously, that'll be available, and we do that every third Sunday of the month. So we are looking at a series on how we know the Bible is true, and it's amazing how many times the Bible uses the word know and assurance, that is know and K-N-O-W, okay? That's an unfortunate homophone in English, okay? It'd be assurance, all those sorts of things, lots of other ways and words that are used in the Bible. So we're looking at a number of messages today. We're kind of really continuing where we left off, we are continuing where we left off last week, and that was in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 through 18. This is 2 Corinthians 5, verses 1 through 10, and I want to read those for you in just a moment. I had a sense this morning, Val, when you read that text this morning, it's a little strange, isn't it, really? I mean, there's just some things about it, like how many verses in the Bible that talk about you not being naked and all that? What is that talking about, okay? So I know that's what you were thinking. That was I wouldn't say 800-pound elephant, but maybe the 20-pound elephant in the room or something like that. So let's take a look at this text, all right? For we know, all right, that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up in life. One commentary I was reading this week said, this is one of the more challenging passages to interpret. And I thought to myself, you really think so? No kidding, right? It is. It's very unusual language. Now, the one who has fashioned us for this very purpose is God, who has given us the Spirit as a deposit. The old King James Version says as an earnest, guaranteeing what is to come. Therefore, we are always confident and know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we live by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So we make it our goal to please him whether we are at home in the body or away from it. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. Okay? Now, just a couple things to start out with, okay? First of all, he says we know that the earthly tent we live in. That's talking about the physical body that we have. Specifically, the way that our physical body is influenced by the fall or affected by the fall. As you remember, I've said before that it really, to say, does someone look like they are 50 years old or 80 years old? And every once in a while, you'll find someone who, I call it the Dick Clark syndrome, for those of you that remember Dick Clark. I swear that guy got younger looking the longer he lived. But that's what happens sometimes is some people, I've noticed that a lot of Asian people, especially Asian women, don't seem to look their age. They look younger than they really are. And if you're blessed with that, you are blessed with that. And I just want you to know that the rest of us hate you because of it, okay? Not really, but we're very envious. But then we read where the Bible says do not covet, and we're okay. Right? So this earthly tent, that's talking about our physical body. Now, the eternal house in heaven is talking about the resurrection body. Now, when it says in heaven, it means ultimately heaven as its source. And we will, remember, heaven is indeed a place on earth. Our eternal destiny is living on a glorified new earth with new heaven and a resurrected body. And that is very difficult for us to think of right now because it seems like such a foreign concept. We just expect that as we get older, we will become more and more feeble. Our metabolism will slow down. We won't be as sharp mentally. We won't be as strong physically. All those things happen. Well, that's actually the effects of the fall. I don't know how much time existed or took place between the time that God created Adam and then created Eve, and then the time that they sinned in the garden by eating the fruit that they were forbidden to eat from. I don't know how much time elapsed between then. One theologian I read in seminary said, well, given human proclivities to just do whatever they want to do, maybe about 20 minutes, all right? We don't know that, okay? We have no idea. But we do know that from the time that they were created up until however long it might have been, till they actually, they would not have aged in the sense that we describe age. They would not have started to get gray hair and bend over and have arthritis and all that sort of stuff. That's foreign to them. And that's going to be an amazing thing. And of course, we can all relate to this phrase here, meanwhile we groan, okay? We groan. I've noticed that. So I don't know about you, but if I drop a book on the floor and I go to pick it up, it's quite an adventure. And I go, oh, there we go, right? We all do that all the time. We don't even think about it anymore, right? I know you do. Don't look at me like, oh, I don't do that, okay? But we do. And the older we get, the groanier we get, okay? The more that we groan. Let's take a look at this. Now, this, again, this text, and in fact the New Testament, is set in a culture and a belief system and a worldview that they knew and they knew of, and they kind of assumed that we knew. But the problem is we don't always. And one of the things that is very clear is that the New Testament worldview, by the biblical writers, is vastly different from that of the philosophers and the Greek teachers and so forth that were around them. And every once in a while, that shows up in the New Testament. For example, in 1 John, John writes that we know that we are, he talks about anyone who, this is how we know that we know him. Anyone who does not believe that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. Right? So we have all these different ways of marking ourselves out. Okay? The idea that God would become human, that Jesus Christ, as the New Testament describes him, would come in the flesh, the idea that God became a human was utterly bizarre to them. Certainly the idea that anyone would be resurrected. Remember when Paul is on Mars Hill, the Areopagus in Acts 17, and he's talking to the people there, and they've said to him, they obviously didn't live in 2022 because he said something they didn't believe or didn't agree with, but they wanted to talk to him about it to find out more about it. Right? That wouldn't happen today. That what would happen is the majority of a lot of people that you see would just say, oh, you're a loony, you're crazy, go away and leave me alone. And they'd be called all sorts of negative names. Right? Let's think about this. All right, so as the New Testament and as Paul in particular, Paul, first of all, is extremely familiar with the writings of the Greek philosophers. In fact, he quotes a couple of them when in Acts 17 when Luke is telling us that story. Right? So this is a quote that I found in my study Bible. It says, "The body as the prison of the immortal soul was a view common to," and these are a couple groups of philosophers you may or may not be familiar with. This will be on Moodle, or on Moodle, that's a different platform. Be on Facebook if you want it and look it up. Very common to Orphic and Pythagorean philosophical schools. Right? In other words, there were a couple of groups of Greek philosophers who looked at you and me as we are an immortal soul trapped within a physical body. And the older that our body gets, the more our spirit is kind of frustrated because it can't go anywhere and it can't do anything. And so, you can't, right? I don't go to the mall very often because I just don't like going to the mall, but because I'm the epitome of that notion that women shop and men buy, okay? I go to the mall, I need a couple shirts, I go buy a couple shirts, I leave, that's it, all right? I might grab a candy bar on the way out or go to the food court, but other than that, okay? That's just the way that we are, right? So, anyway. Belief in the immortality of the soul was by no means universal, though. The idea was that by many of the Greeks that my spirit or my soul or this immaterial part of me is trapped in this physical body. So that death is actually good because what death does is once for all gets rid of this crazy prison that I'm living in. This body that's only going to get older and more decrepit and more wasted away. And then finally, when the spirit is released, I'm free to go and do whatever I want. The Greek philosophers often talked about the soul is trapped in the body as a bird is trapped in a cage. And when you open the cage door, the bird flies out and is free. And then you can throw the cage away. Right? That is not a biblical view of humanity. I want you to, and it may seem like it sometimes, but it's really not. The biblical view of humanity is this. I am, you are a body. You don't just have a body. Your body is not just a convenient storage place for your spirit or your soul until such time as your body dies. That's not what's going on. Your body is part of you that was created. In fact, in the Garden of Eden, it says that God formed from the dust of the ground, that's the earthly, that's the material aspect of us, and then he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. I don't have a body, I am a body. I don't have a mind, I am a mind. I don't have a soul, I am a soul. And all thoughts, mind, will, emotions, all things all come under that heading. So when Paul says to the people on the Areopagus, the resurrection of the dead, they're listening to him up to that point. And then when he says that, they're like, this is crazy. And they laugh, and some of them leave. There are a few others that say, oh, we'd like to talk to you some more about this, but a lot of them just, no, they don't. For them, it's sort of like a prisoner being released from jail and then saying, oh, you know what, I want to go back to jail. It's sort of like a bird wanting to get out of a cage and then say, you know what, I want to go back in the cage. That's what the resurrection is. Because they don't understand that the true essence of who you and I are is body, soul, mind, heart, spirit, all those different parts of us. I hope when you get to heaven, you brace yourself for a surprise, okay? Because you're going to see everybody that you know, and you're going to recognize them, because you're not going to be more dumb than you are now, right? You're going to recognize them, but they're going to look like no effects of the fall. It's going to be an amazing thing. So anyway, belief in the immortality of the soul was by no means universal, though. Both Stoics and Epicureans rejected personal immortality. Stoics believe that the individual soul at death becomes submerged in the divine universal soul that permeates the cosmos. Simply put, when you die, you become a little bit of the whole creation. You're just kind of absorbed into the whole created being. You lose any and all individual distinctiveness. The Stoics believed in what's called an impersonal world soul, that's what you are a part of. Right? Epicureans thought, this is another group of philosophers, they thought that at death, all the atoms of your body just dissipate. That's what happens. Now, that happened when you slept as well, but that was manageable, okay? So your little atoms that are roaming around inside of you just all sort of calm down, and then you sleep. And then when you wake up, they all come back together again. So the Epicureans thought that at death, the atoms of the soul immediately disperse and all sensation ceases. So what Epicureanism says, that when you die, there's no more you. There's no more you. You have dissipated. This is something that I was following a philosopher, and I can't remember his name, but he was asked, he says, what do you think happens at death to people? And he said, nothing. We just don't exist. Okay? The typical Greek looked on death as the end of life and therefore something terrible. Stoics consequently turned death into a human achievement. The goal was to live well and to die well. Sort of like dying healthy, you know. You do that. Now, Reform Judaism, which is a very popular form, when you talk about people who are Jewish, there's a lot more I could say about this, and I hope that I'm able to make sense of this to you. When you talk about Judaism or the belief of Jewish people, there are, just as you would expect, there's all different levels. There's conservative Jews and there are more liberal Jews. The Reformed Jews are the more liberal ones. They don't care about kosher food. Sabbath is not a big deal to them. It's a big deal, but not in the same way that it is that you typically might think. So Reformed Judaism is practiced today, does not believe in a life after death. Once you're dead, that's it. You're dead, you're gone. One of their rabbis once referred to human life as this: one moment of brilliance between two infinite nothings. One moment of brilliance, that's right now, between two infinite nothings. Before you came into existence, infinite nothing. After you come into existence, then you die, infinite nothing. Well, isn't that an encouraging thought to think about, right? I know if some of you remember there was a song in the 1970s by a group called Kansas. It was called Dust in the Wind. Okay? Same old song, just a drop of water in an endless sea. All you do crumbles to the ground, though you refuse to see. Dust in the wind. All you are is dust in the wind. Beautiful song, beautifully performed. Depressing as can be, all right? All right, so what is the Christian alternative to this? Is it just that when your body dies, it goes into the ground, then your spirit is free to be with God? No, that's temporary. What is our ultimate state? Is it just that we die and then we no longer exist? There's no sensation? Okay, let's take a look at what Paul says here in this passage that will help us, I think. First of all, he says, our life here on earth at the present is a tabernacle, or a tent. That's what a tabernacle is. When we are raised from the dead, we will be a building or a temple. Now, this is a pattern that's found throughout the Bible. The Bible is full, from Genesis 1 and 2 all the way through Revelation 21 and 22. God dwells with his people. He does not take them out of the world to be someplace with him. He comes here to be with us. That's a big, big difference, but it's all over the Bible. Right? In fact, in John chapter 1, verse 14, it says the Word that was with God and was God and so forth, talking about Jesus, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And that word translated dwelt is he literally tabernacled among us. He tented among us. In other words, his first coming was temporary, because his first coming would end, well, it would end with his death, burial, and resurrection. But his death was him going to the cross, and willingly, as he said, no one takes my life from me. I have the power to lay it down. I have the power to take it up again. That was the first coming of Jesus. That was a tabernacling among us, or a tenting among us. When Jesus comes the second time, it will be a temple. He will be templing among us, be permanent building. Remember when Israel, builds the tabernacle and it's a tent, and then David says, oh, this isn't good. I'm living in a palace, and I don't think it's right that the Lord should live in a tent. So I'm going to build a temple. And of course, his personal prophet, says, yeah, you do whatever God says, And then God says, no, I don't want him doing that. But Solomon eventually built, and that was a permanent building. Right? The tabernacle was portable because the Israelites were wandering throughout the wilderness all those years when they're settled in the promised land. So Jesus came to be with us. He tabernacled among us. When he comes, he will come and he will be with us permanently, be in a temple. All right. Secondly, we groan. Okay, we've already established that. Right, we groan. Groaning is a part of life lived while dealing with the effects of the fall. Sometimes we ask the question, well, this person is such a good person, and they're a Christian, or even if they're not a Christian. This person is a follower of Christ, and this horrible thing happened to them. Why is that? Well, remember, Job's friends accused him of, you must have done something terrible because that's the only reason that you would be, suffering so much, because you must have sinned against God. Job, what you should do is just confess your sin and accept God's, ask God for forgiveness. No, that's. He said, no, I didn't do that. That's not true. Okay? So groaning is a part of life lived while dealing with the effects of the fall. Whenever we groan, we are saying implicitly that we anxiously await the completion of our temple, the resurrection of the body. When you were younger, you were more temple-like than you were tabernacle-like. When you were 16 or 17 or 15 or whatever, you probably thought you were immortal, okay? I could not imagine death when I was 15, dying. Not me. That's for old people, okay? Now I look in the mirror. Who is that, Who is that, okay? I had an invitation this Wednesday night. There's several people that I went to high school with that every 3 or 4 or 5 months they get together and just kind of renew old times. And they had one this past Wednesday, and I thought about going, but I had a lot going on. I just wasn't able to do it. But I looked at the pictures of them. I thought, I don't want to hang out with those bunch of old people. How come everybody I went to high school with is now old? Why is that? Oh, wait a minute. I think I know why. Okay. So we're groaning. We're anxiously awaiting. It's not, the effects of the fall are still there. Christians still become ill. They still contract various diseases, and of course, they ultimately will die. Some may die at a fairly early age. Some may die at a very advanced age, but that's the nature of living in a tabernacle. That's the effects of the fall. That's why we long for that temple body, the resurrection of the body. Third, God has given us his Spirit, the Holy Spirit, as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. All right. So what is my assurance? What's the guarantee? What marks out the hope and expectation that I have that I'm going to be all right? This is going to be okay. Right? He has given me the Holy Spirit. The Spirit is the one, and again, that's a big thing for Paul. The Spirit is a huge thing for Paul. In fact, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, he says that we know the things of God not by virtue of experiencing them, what we would basically call sense, sight, touch, feel, all that sort of stuff, or intellectual mind. Okay? We know them because they've been revealed to us by his Spirit. So that's an important thing. So we carry about the Holy Spirit indwelling us, and the Spirit indwells us both individually as well as corporately as an earnest, as a deposit. We would say a down payment. I don't know if stores still do this anymore, but sometimes they used to do what was called layaway. Okay, you ever have that? Remember that? Layaway? Okay. You'd want to buy something, and you'd go and sign up for it, and you'd make a payment, and then you make another payment. You make it over like several months or whatever. And eventually, when you paid it all off, you got to take it home. Right? Now everybody has credit, and they got a real easy credit. I remember my wife and I, when we first got married in 1978, we wanted to get credit. Guess what you have to do? You get a credit card. So we went to Sears. Who didn't go to Sears, right? Okay, they're basically gone. They're bankrupt. That's what they get for treating us the way they treated us. But anyway. So we'd like to get a credit card. And they said, well, do you have any credit elsewhere? No. Well, you really can't get a credit card unless you have credit. Okay, how do I start that process, okay? How do I do that? So we kind of talked around and everything, and, finally they gave us a credit card. I think it was like $500 limit. That was in 1978, $500. In 1978, it was a lot of money. And so we find, nowadays, my goodness, there's how your day goes by, but what I don't get things in the mail, right? You too, probably. Yeah, start with, 10, I bought some tires, and they told me, do you have a credit card with us at Goodyear? And I said, no, we used to, but we don't have any more. Well, if you do, we'll give you this discount rate, and we'll give you this rebate, and all this. Okay, all right. So fine. So they called, they go online, and within about a minute, I've got like a $8,000 credit limit. I mean, how many tires can you buy in a lifetime, right? So fine. So I'm paying that off interest-free. Hey, if they want to do that, fine. I can let most of the money sit in my account and earn interest. I don't, but that's common. It wasn't very common. So people used to buy stuff then on layaway. My wife and I were walking through a department store, and she saw this coat. It's long gone. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it just was one of these little jackets with sort of the furry kind of look, and everything. And she wanted to get one of those, and we didn't have the money for it, so I said, well, can we put it on layaway? Said, yeah, you put it on layaway. So put it on layaway. There's a little fee, and then you pay, and so forth. And we referred to that. I referred to that, and she referred to it as well as her spoiled rotten coat, right? Because that didn't take much to spoil your rotten back then. So we have this down payment. We have this layaway plan, if you will, that we've been given the Spirit. We've not been given the full benefit of redemption applied to us yet, but we have this down payment, this earnest, this deposit of the Spirit. Fourth, we know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. Now again, in the context of what he's talking about here, you have to understand this passage. Okay? He's saying, this has nothing to do with my desires or my wants. He's saying that as long as you are living in this body, which is affected by the fall, then you are away from the Lord. You don't have and we are. I mean, we're physically removed. Jesus is no longer physically present with us. He sent the Spirit. He says that, at the end of the Gospel of John, he sent that, John 14, other places too. He sent the Spirit because that's the assurance that we have that we belong to him. But we don't have that full presence yet. I long for that day. I can only imagine, to quote a popular song title, I can only imagine what it's going to be like when we get to that point. So as he says in verse 6, we are always confident and know that as long as we're at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. So we're confident, we have this expectation, but we know that the full benefits of redemption have not been applied to us. This is simply to say that while we are in the tent of this body with the effects of the fall, we are not at home with the Lord in our temple body. I don't know precisely, the only thing I really feel like I know about the resurrection body is what is not going to be true of it. It's not going to die. No sickness. No pain. No tears. That's what Revelation says. So there's all these different things. I don't know, if I'll be able to run any faster. I don't know. Right? I kind of think, that the spiritual giftedness that you have now is going to be just sort of carried over. So if you have the gift of whatever, okay, music, whatever, you may or may not have that gift because we don't necessarily need everybody to have that gift. Again, pure speculation, okay? While we are living in this body with the effects of the fall, we are not at home with the Lord. Fifth, in verse 9, regardless of where we are, whether we're in the body now or in our resurrected and glorified body is what he's referring to. Okay? We make it our goal to please him. Now, I can do one of two things. I can sit around and gripe about the fact that I'm groaning all the time. Right? I can do that. Or I can say, you know what? It's the human race that put ourselves in this situation, and we have a promise of redemption. The full benefit of that redemption has not yet been applied to us, but we know that it's coming. And I look forward to that day. Man, do I look forward to that day. I really do. A couple years ago, the end of the school year, last day of exam week, I was talking to one of the students at Cornerstone who's on the baseball team, and He said, hey, we're gonna go out and, after exams, a bunch of us are just going to throw a baseball around on this open grassy area. And so we did. I brought my glove to school, and I was out there and throwing the ball around. And it's weird. When you're 60 plus and you throw a baseball, college students look at you like, well, isn't that interesting? That silly old man doing all that sort of stuff. And, I kind of warmed up easily and all that. And then I started throwing. I tried to throw a little bit harder, and it's like, ow. Where'd that come from, right? Now, I did all right. I was a little sore the next day. But I was definitely in this body right now. And I look forward to when I'm not in this body any longer. But in the meantime, it is my goal to please him. That's what we're called to do. We're called to please and obey him. Our present task supersedes whatever our present condition is. Okay? Our present task, what we are called to do, supersedes whatever our present condition is. I am in this tent body, and I will one day be in my temple body, but regardless, my task and my focus is to please God. If I'm always looking inwardly and saying, oh my goodness, I wish I wasn't 66 years old, I wish I was 26 years old again, and as long as I had the knowledge that I have now, that would be the precondition, okay? 26, yeah, it'd be nice to be 26 again. I remember I played softball for a number of years, and to be perfectly frank and honest with you, I was pretty decent. I really was. I was an outfielder and wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but if I got to the ball, I caught it, right? And I had a decent arm. Decent, not great, but decent, okay? As church leagues go, okay? My team's won a couple of championships, and that was pretty cool. I gave up softball after a while, and then a little later I tried to make a comeback at the ripe old age of 35, okay? That game, I slid into second base trying to break up a double play, and I rolled my ankle on the base as I slid, and so I said, you know what, I'm done, okay? And then I tried to make a comeback when I was 59 here, playing for First Baptist, and so I didn't get killed out there. Some of you saw me do that, okay? We're in a tent body. Doesn't matter. One day we'll be in a temple, but regardless, my task and my focus is to please God. And this is how he ends this section. He says this, very familiar passage. Right? For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. Yes, I have a body that is affected by the fall. I have a body that is aging, that is not able to do what it used to be able to do years ago. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm responsible to do whatever I do in this body to serve God, because I'm going to appear before the judgment seat of Christ. And one of the things I'm not going to be able to do is say, well, I didn't appreciate being old and feeble. I didn't appreciate being old and gray and all that sort of stuff. No, I've got a task and a job to do. Now, we all have different abilities. We all have different strengths, okay? I was thinking the other day, when I loved playing softball. It was fun, but I realized the game is always bigger than the people who play it. There was a time when I couldn't play it, when I was too young. And now there's a time when I can't play it and I'm too old, okay? Because I'm too old. But the game is still there. The Christian life is there. We have responsibilities. Maybe we're not able to do as much. Maybe we have to slow down, and I think to some extent we do have to slow down, although I will say this, I've never been so busy in my life since I retired. And I think, Don, you can agree with that, right? A lot of us can agree with that. But I have a responsibility, and that responsibility really has never changed, and that is to please the Lord in everything that I do, because I'm going to appear before the judgment seat of Christ, and all of us are as well. And we're going to be held accountable for what we did in this body. We're not going to be allowed a free pass because of excuses that we made. So I don't pretend to understand everything about this passage, but I think those are some of the main points that we need to take from us. Let's pray and sing, and then we'll be dismissed.